If you had told me 3 years ago that I'd end up here, alone in a creaking apartment with more regrets than furniture, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, I still believed in do-overs and clean slates. I believed that if you just tried hard enough, life would reward you for the effort. I don't believe that anymore. My name is Mara Blake, 29 years old, self-proclaimed master of starting over and failing spectacularly every single time. I'm the kind of person who leaves half-packed boxes in every apartment she's ever rented, just in case she has to run again. I'm the kind of person who knows exactly how many steps it takes to reach the door in the dark. And tonight, that door slammed shut behind me like a final warning, like the universe telling me there's no more running left, except for Max. He's the only thing I never tried to leave behind. I stood there, my hand still on the cold metal knob, my heartbeat rattling in my ears so loud I barely heard the echo of the slam. For a second, I thought I'd locked out the only piece of my life that still made sense. But then I felt it, a soft push behind my knees, warm breath against my calves. And I knew, Max, I breathed out. I didn't even have to turn around to see him. I knew his weight, the shape of him, my rescue, my shadow, my absolution wrapped in fur and quiet understanding. When I finally faced him, his big brown eyes were locked on mine. He tilted his head like he was asking a question I didn't have an answer for. Maybe he was wondering why I kept shutting doors so hard, why my chest always felt like it was about to crack open. Maybe he didn't care, maybe he just wanted dinner. I dropped my keys onto the tiny entryway table with a hollow clatter. The noise bounced off the bare walls, a reminder that I still hadn't unpacked the paintings I told myself I'd hang someday. Max's tail thumped once, twice, against the closet door. He didn't care about the bare walls or the unopened boxes. He cared about me. And I think that's the thing that scares me the most. I crouched down, and Max pressed forward without hesitation. 90 pounds of shepherd mix leaning so hard into my chest I nearly toppled backward. His nose found my neck, warm breath cutting through the chill I hadn't realized had settled into my skin. I wrapped my arms around him like he was the only solid thing left in the room, because he was. You always know, don't you? I murmured into his fur. He smelled like rain and the old fleece blanket he dragged from room to room. Familiar. Grounding. Real. You always know when I'm about to fall apart. His answer was a soft huff, a push of his big head deeper into my shoulder. It almost hurt, how much he trusted me, how much he stayed even when I was my worst self. I stood up before I could sink too deep into that thought. Max watched me with those eyes that always felt too knowing. I moved to the kitchen, and he trailed me step for step, his claws clicking on the scuffed wooden floor. No matter how many times I tried to keep him at arm's length, he always closed the gap. Always. I opened the fridge, empty, of course, except for half a takeout container and a bottle of cheap white wine. Max sat down so close to my calf that his fur brushed my skin. He knew the drill. He knew that the fridge door was a gamble that might pay off if he looked patient enough. I found an old piece of chicken, sniffed it, shrugged. Good enough for me, good enough for him. I tore it in half, handed him a chunk. He took it gently, the way he always did, big jaws and careful teeth. Sometimes I thought he was more careful with me than I was with myself. Don't look at me like that, I said as he chewed, those eyes fixed on my face. I know I need to go grocery shopping. I know I need to call my mom back. I know I need to stop pretending I'm fine. He just sat there, tail sweeping the floor once, twice, like a metronome counting down the seconds I was wasting by standing still. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, staring at nothing while he finished his bite. Outside, the wind had picked up, whistling through the drafty window above the sink. I'd taped the corners last winter when the glass rattled in the storms, but I knew the cold would find its way in anyway. It always did. Max nudged my knee, pulling me back before my thoughts could spiral too far down the drain. He never barked at me, never demanded. He just was. And sometimes that was the only thing that kept me here at all. I grabbed his leash from the hook by the door. The second the metal clasp jingled, he perked up, ears forward, tail wagging in that slow, hopeful sweep. I envied how easily he shifted from watchful to ready for anything. I wished I could do the same, alright, big guy, I said, forcing my voice into something like lightness. Let's go walk off this mess, huh? He bumped his nose into my thigh like he agreed. I tugged on my old coat, frayed at the cuffs, zipper half broken, and jammed a knit beanie over my unbrushed hair. If anyone saw me like this, they'd probably cross the street. Max thought I was perfect like this. Or maybe he just didn't care about perfect at all. That we stepped into the hallway. The air smelled like cold concrete and someone else's leftover dinner. Max trotted ahead of me, then paused to look back, like he always did. Like he was saying, "Come on, Mara. Keep up." We stepped out into the night, and the wind slapped my cheeks red. Max lowered his nose to the ground immediately, nostrils flaring, tail wagging slow and steady as he mapped out invisible worlds I'd never understand. I let him lead, my hand loose on the leash. We didn't have a destination. We never did. I liked the way the streets emptied after 9, no cars, no neighbors pretending not to see me. Just me and Max, his breath fogging the air, his big paws padding silent across the cracked pavement. He was always just a step ahead, ears flicking back every few seconds to check that I was still there. He never let me fall behind for long. Halfway down the block, I felt the tension drain out of my shoulders. It always did when we were out here together. The city felt softer at night, less like a cage, more like a quiet promise that maybe tomorrow wouldn't be so sharp around the edges. We passed the old laundromat with its flickering neon sign. The rusted swings at the park that squeaked like they were remembering kids who didn't come here anymore. Max stopped to sniff at a lamppost, then at a torn flyer drifting across the sidewalk. I let him. This was his time. His world. I was just a guest, following in his paw prints. When we turned back toward the apartment, the wind had gone from sharp to biting. I tugged my coat tighter, shoved my free hand into my pocket. Max didn't seem to notice. He trotted ahead, tail waving like a flag that said, "We're almost home, don't worry," and when we stepped back inside, the door slammed shut. Again, louder this time, like it needed to remind me where I was. But I didn't flinch. Max leaned his shoulder into my thigh, his big eyes steady on mine, and for one heartbeat, the noise in my head went quiet. Damn, my name is Mara Blake. I'm 29, broken in more places than I care to admit, and I slam doors when I should leave them open. But tonight, my dog was right behind me. And that's the only thing that mattered. I didn't sleep much that night. I never really do, not the way people in movies sleep, all soft sighs and tangled sheets. And the promise of waking up feeling new. I don't wake up new. I wake up tired, the same tired that I carry through every room I pass through, the same tired that sticks to my ribs like old cobwebs I keep pretending I don't see. Max slept, though, curled up so close to my side of the bed that I had maybe a sliver of mattress left for myself. I tried once to make him sleep on the floor, bought him a nice bed, memory foam, orthopedic for his hips, but he dragged it halfway across the room and pushed it up against my side of the bed like a barricade. That was 2 apartments ago. He's never slept on it since. He wants the real thing, the press of my shoulder, the steady heartbeat under his chin. I lay there in the dark, one hand resting on his back, feeling the slow rise and fall that meant. For now, he was far away from my worries. He twitched once, back paw jerking against my calf. Maybe he was chasing rabbits. Maybe he was somewhere I couldn't follow, somewhere quiet and green and nothing like this drafty, creaking box I call home. The some point I drifted off, just enough to dream, not enough to rest. I dreamed of doors. Always doors. Some open. Some locked, some slamming so hard they rattled the pictures off the walls. I dreamed of voices behind them. Of Max on the other side, whining and scratching, and me unable to turn the handle. I woke up with the taste of splinters in my mouth. When I finally got out of bed, Max lifted his head just enough to track me across the room. His eyes half-lidded, soft and brown and questioning. "Where are you going?" "Are we going, just coffee?" I whispered, though I knew he didn't care about the words. He watched until I disappeared into the kitchen, then let out a soft huff that I swear sounded like "don't take too long" before thumping his head back onto the pillow. My pillow, of course. The kettle whistled sharp in the cold silence. I wrapped both hands around my chipped mug, trying to siphon warmth through my palms and into my bones. Outside, the sun hadn't bothered to rise properly, just a smudge of pale gray behind the dirty window. I caught my reflection in the glass, messy hair, tired eyes, an old sweatshirt that used to belong to my brother. I looked exactly like I felt, half here, half somewhere else. Behind me, Max's nails clicked on the floor. I didn't need to turn around to know he was sitting in the doorway, that big shape filling the narrow space like a question mark. You want out? I asked. He tilted his head, ears twitching. Not yet. He just wanted to make sure I hadn't disappeared. Between sips I crouched down, ignoring the way my knees popped like old hinges. Max pressed his forehead into my chest, hard enough to make me spill a little coffee onto my wrist. I didn't mind. The warmth was sharp, real. Proof that I was awake. That we were both still here. It wasn't until later, hours later, when the city had finally decided to wake up too, that I realized I'd been putting it off. The walk. The leaving. The stepping out into the world where things might happen that I couldn't control. But Max knew. Of course he did. He'd been watching me all morning, those eyes tracking every twitch of my fingers, every shallow breath. He knew when I was stalling. He knew when it was time to pull me out. So when he sat by the door, tail sweeping slow arcs across the dusty floor, I didn't argue. I tugged on the same coat, the same hat, shoved my feet into boots I'd meant to replace last winter. Max let out a soft woof when I snapped the leash onto his collar. Not impatient, just ready. The hallway felt colder than yesterday. Or maybe I just felt softer, easier to bruise. We stepped out together, the door slamming shut behind us again. This time it echoed down the hallway like a warning. Or a promise. Or both. Outside, the city didn't care about my insomnia, about the ghosts I carried around in the pockets of my coat. The city had its own ghosts, broken bottles in the gutter, graffiti half-scrubbed from brick walls, a crow perched on a streetlight watching us with shiny black eyes. Max tugged me forward. Like he had a destination in mind. Maybe he did. I've stopped pretending I know where we're going when we leave the house. He seems to know better than I ever do. We cut down the side street behind the old corner store. The windows were papered over with faded signs, coming soon, they'd said for 2 years now. Nothing ever came. Max paused at the corner, nose pressed to the ground, tail held high like an antenna catching signals I'd never tune into. While he sniffed, I checked my phone, out of habit, not because I expected anything. 2 missed calls from my mother. A text from my landlord about the rent. I shoved it back into my pocket before the guilt could bloom too loud in my chest. Not here. Not with Max. Outside was our truce zone. The park was empty when we reached it, just frostbitten grass and the slow creak of the swings in the wind. Max bounded ahead, nose down, tail flicking side to side as he mapped the invisible stories that crossed the path overnight. Sometimes I wondered what he'd smell if he pressed his nose to my skin. Regret? Loneliness? The stale scent of doors slammed too hard, too often. I sat on the cold bench near the swings, the metal seeping chill through my jeans. Max circled back to me, dropped a damp stick at my feet like it was a peace offering. Seriously? I laughed, and my voice sounded wrong out here, too loud against the hush of frost and wind. But Max just stared at me, head cocked, eyes bright. So I picked it up and tossed it down the path. He tore after it, paws skidding in the mud, tail a banner behind him. Watching him run reminded me that maybe not everything breaks when you stop trying to hold it together. Maybe some things run toward you even when you're the messiest version of yourself. That he dropped the stick in my lap when he came back, panting, tongue lolling sideways. I scratched behind his ear, and he leaned into it so hard I nearly lost my balance on the bench. Who do you think you are, huh? I murmured. My therapist? My parole officer? Max just thumped his tail once, then twice, and nudged the stick closer like we were done talking now. Time to throw. Time to move. Time to forget for a second that the world kept asking questions. I didn't have answers for it. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, throwing, chasing, throwing again. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the line of trees at the far end of the park, the way the bare branches clawed at the pale sky like they were trying to pull it closer. I wondered if they ever got tired, reaching for something they'd never catch. Max didn't care. He only cared that I kept throwing the stick. So I did. Again and again and again. When we finally headed home, the sun had pushed its way through the clouds in weak streaks of gold that made the frost sparkle on the grass. Max stayed close this time, his side brushing my knee every few steps like he was tethering me to the present moment. The city felt different on the walk back. Softer, somehow. Or maybe I was the one who'd softened, just enough to notice the things that didn't hurt, the way the bakery on the corner smelled like warm bread, the chalk drawings on the cracked sidewalk, the old man on his stoop who always nodded when we passed, as if Max and I were a secret he'd promised to keep. When we reached our building, Max paused at the door. He looked up at me, eyes searching, waiting for something I didn't know how to give. Maybe an answer. Maybe a promise. Maybe just the courage to open the door and not slam it shut behind me this time. I scratched behind his ear. He leaned into my palm, soft and solid and real. And when I finally opened the door, he stepped through first, turning back just once to make sure I was right behind him. The door swung shut. Not a slam this time, just a quiet click that echoed through the empty hallway. Inside, the air felt warmer. Max dropped the stick he'd carried all the way back at my feet like a gift I hadn't earned. I laughed, the sound bouncing off the walls, and for a second I believed it, believed that maybe tomorrow the door wouldn't slam at all. Some people say that when you live alone long enough, the walls start to talk back to you. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that sometimes the silence in my apartment hums like it's alive, like it's listening. Waiting for me to admit something out loud that I'm not ready to say. After Max and I got back from the park, I let the door close softly behind us. No slam this time. I told myself that was progress. Max trotted ahead of me, stick still clamped between his teeth, tail wagging in slow, proud sweeps. He dropped it near the couch and nudged it once with his nose, as if to say, "We're keeping this one." I left it where it landed. Maybe it made the place feel less empty, a crooked little reminder that someone here still found joy in something as simple as an old branch. I shrugged off my coat, tossed my hat onto the wobbly side table, and collapsed onto the couch without bothering to kick off my boots. Max climbed up right after me, ignoring the fact that there was an entire floor he could stretch out on. He pressed himself into the narrow space between me and the back cushion, his big head wedging against my ribs until I curled my arm around him like it was second nature. Because it was. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling. It had a crack running across it that I used to tell myself I'd fix. I'd tell myself a lot of things. I'll fix the crack. I'll fix the leaky window. I'll fix my life. But the crack stayed. The window stayed drafty. And me? I stayed cracked. Max shifted, his nose burrowing under my arm until I lifted it so he could settle his head on my chest. His breath warmed the cotton of my sweatshirt. I buried my fingers in the thick fur at his neck, feeling the steady drum of his heartbeat. If he felt the brokenness in me, he never flinched. He just stayed. That's what he did best, he stayed. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I knew, I was blinking awake to the dull gray light that meant it was still day, but barely. Max hadn't moved except to press closer, as if he'd been guarding me from dreams I didn't remember having. I sat up slowly. He followed, ears flicking, eyes soft and questioning. "Where are you going?" they asked. "What now?" "Food," I mumbled. Voice scratchy. "For both of us." He wagged his tail once in approval and slid off the couch to pad into the kitchen ahead of me, nails tapping the hardwood like an impatient drumroll. I watched him nose around the empty food bowl near the fridge and felt that familiar twist of guilt in my gut. I should have refilled it this morning. I should have bought real groceries days ago. I should have done a lot of things. I pulled open the cabinet under the sink and grabbed the battered bag of kibble. Max sat so still you'd think he was posing for a portrait, head high, ears forward, tail thumping the floor in slow, deliberate beats. I poured the kibble into his bowl and he waited, just for a heartbeat, until I gave the smallest nod. Then he dove in like I'd handed him a feast. While he crunched away, I stared into the fridge again. Same story, half a bottle of wine, a sad jar of mustard, a takeout container I was afraid to open. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it for a second, letting the cold seep into my skin. You deserve better than this, Max, I said quietly. He didn't look up, just kept eating, his tail sweeping the floor in lazy arcs. Maybe he didn't care that I didn't have it together. Or maybe that was the point, he stayed anyway. I just settled back on the couch with a mug of stale instant coffee when the knock came. 3 sharp raps against the door, loud enough to echo through the quiet, loud enough to make Max's head snap up from his nap. His ears perked, his whole body tense like he was waiting for my cue. Nobody ever knocked here. Not neighbors, not friends, because I didn't really have friends anymore, not the kind who dropped by without calling. My stomach flipped. Maybe it was the landlord, tired of my excuses. Maybe it was my mother, standing on the other side of that thin slab of wood with her questions and her worried eyes and her "When are you coming home, Mara?" Maybe it was worse, some echo of the past I'd locked out years ago, come back to rattle my bones. Max moved first, one soft growl, deep in his chest, more a question than a threat. He stepped in front of the door, planting himself like a blockade. I stood behind him, coffee forgotten, fingers fluttering uselessly at my side. The knock came again. This time softer. Hesitant. I sucked in a breath I didn't really want. It's okay, I murmured to Max, placing my palm between his shoulder blades. His fur was warm under my hand, his heartbeat steady under my fingertips. It's fine, buddy. We're fine. But the truth was I wasn't sure we were. I stepped around him, my bare feet cold against the floor. The peephole was useless, fogged over from age or maybe just neglect. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the knob. Max let out a low whine behind me, tail brushing my calf. His way of asking, "Are you sure?" No. I wasn't. But I opened the door anyway. Standing there was a boy, maybe 19, maybe 20. Stringy hair under a beanie, eyes wide and darting like he expected someone bigger to appear behind me any second. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, hollow cheeks, hands jammed deep in the pockets of a threadbare jacket that wasn't doing him any favors against the November wind. He said, blinking at me, then at Max, then back at me. Hi. Max didn't bark, but he didn't move either. He stood pressed against my side, his chest a wall between me and whatever this was. Can I help you? I asked. My voice came out sharper than I intended, an edge that said I didn't have time for this. Whoever he was, the boy shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He glanced down the hallway like he was checking for exits. Then he looked back at me with eyes that reminded me too much of my own reflection, tired, cornered. I'm sorry to bother you, he stammered. Your dog. I saw him yesterday in the park. He's yours, right? Max leaned harder into my leg, as if reminding me that whatever I said next mattered. I nodded slowly. Yeah, he's mine. The boy's shoulders dropped, like he'd been holding his breath for days and only just remembered how to let it out. He came up to me yesterday. Dropped a stick at my feet. Like he wanted me to throw it. I felt something squeeze tight behind my ribs. That sounded like Max. That sounded exactly like Max. Okay, I said carefully. And? The boy pulled one hand out of his pocket. He was holding something small, folded paper, creased and smudged at the corners. He held it out to me with trembling fingers. I think he wanted me to give you this. I didn't take it at first. My brain caught on the edges of his words, trying to find the shape of what he was saying. Max pressed closer, a low, curious whine in his throat. I reached out, took the paper. It was thin, soft with wear. I unfolded it with numb fingers. The words inside were written in my brother's handwriting. Words I hadn't seen in almost 4 years. Don't close the door. That was it. 3 words. A ghost of an instruction from someone I'd buried under layers of silence and half-truths. When I looked up, the boy was already backing away down the hallway. Max didn't bark, didn't move to follow. He just watched me with those eyes that always felt like they could see through the cracks in my chest. I stood there for a long time, the paper fluttering in my hand, the door still open behind me. Max nudged my thigh, soft but insistent, like he was reminding me that the world hadn't ended yet. That maybe, this time, I didn't have to slam the door shut at all. I stood in the doorway so long I lost track of time. The paper felt weightless in my hand, but heavy everywhere else. Don't close the door. Just 3 words in my brother's handwriting, slanted, a little sloppy, the same way he'd scribble grocery lists on the backs of receipts when we were kids. It shouldn't have felt like a bomb going off in my chest, but it did. Max pressed his nose into my thigh, hard enough that I stumbled back a step into the apartment. He huffed like he was scolding me. Come on, Mara. Move. But I couldn't. I just stared down the hall where the boy had disappeared, listening to the echo of his footsteps fading into silence. Don't close the door, Max pawed at the threshold. Once, claws ticking against the warped wood. Then he turned and trotted inside without waiting for me to follow, his tail brushing the side of my leg like a lighthouse beam sweeping past. I took that tiny touch like a shove and stepped back too, pulling the door just far enough that it rested against the frame, open, but only just. Inside, everything felt the same, but nothing did. The apartment hummed like it knew I was about to do something different for once. Max settled by the couch, stick between his front paws like a worry stone. He watched me with that steady gaze, eyes soft, ears half-cocked, waiting. I sat on the floor in front of him, the note crumpled between my fingers. I wanted to ask him what it meant, as if he'd open his mouth and answer me in plain English. It means stay. It means trust. It means breathe. But he just laid his head on my knee and sighed through his nose, warm and steady, like he was reminding me he was here. That was enough. For now, when my brother left, disappeared, really, I'd slammed every door I could find. The real ones, the ones in my head, the ones between me and anyone who asked too many questions. I didn't want to talk about how someone could vanish without a note or an explanation or even a goodbye. That made sense. I didn't want to hear my mother's voice cracking on the phone at 2 a.m., asking if I'd heard from him, if I thought he'd come back. I didn't want to see the hope in her eyes shrivel up when I said no, Mom. No, so I closed everything. Locked it down so tight I convinced myself the grief wouldn't leak through the cracks. And when that didn't work, I found Max, alone in a shelter kennel with his ribs too sharp under patchy fur, looking at me like he knew exactly what hiding felt like. I didn't save him. He saved me. Or maybe we saved each other, and now this boy at my door, this scrap of paper like a message in a bottle tossed back into my tide. Don't close the door. Why now? Why through a stranger? Why through Max? I ran my hand along Max's head, fingers tracing the scar behind his ear, a remnant from his time before me. He blinked up at me, slow and patient, like he had all the time in the world to wait for me to get out of my own way. I didn't sleep that night either. I lay on the couch, Max pressed into my side like a second heartbeat, the note on my chest like a paperweight holding me to this moment. Every creak in the old building felt louder than usual. The radiator ticked. Pipes groaned somewhere in the walls. A car door slammed outside, sharp and final. I flinched every time, afraid it was another knock. Afraid it wasn't. When the sky finally paled into something that almost looked like morning, I still hadn't decided what to do. Part of me wanted to crumple the note, toss it in the trash with the takeout cartons and my collection of tomorrows. Another part of me wanted to run down the hall, pound on every door until I found that boy again, drag the truth out of him with my bare hands. Neither felt right. Both felt impossible. Max was simple. He woke up, stretched long and slow, tongue lolling in a big yawn that made me smile for the first time in hours. He nudged my shoulder with his cold nose until I sat up. Then trotted to the door, leash hook clinking when he bumped it with his snout. Come on. Walk first. Think later to so I did what I always did when I didn't know what to do, I let him lead. Outside, the city felt half asleep, delivery trucks humming down side streets, the sky painted in bruised purples and golds that made everything look softer than it really was. Max sniffed along the sidewalk like he was reading a secret map only he could see. I followed, one hand loose on the leash, the other buried in my coat pocket, fingers brushing the folded paper over and over like a worry bead. He pulled me down the same route as yesterday, past the boarded-up corner store, past the faded mural of a giant sunflower someone had spray-painted on the brick wall years ago. We cut through the park, frost still clinging to the grass in brittle blades that crunched under Max's paws. I half expected to see the boy again, lurking near the swings, waiting with another message or an explanation I didn't know how to ask for. But the park was empty. Just me, Max, and the whisper of wind through bare branches overhead. Max stopped near the bench where we'd sat yesterday. He turned to me, tail wagging slow, eyes bright like he was proud of something. Before I could ask what, he dropped into a play bow, front paws spread wide, but in the air, tongue lolling sideways. He barked once, sharp but not loud. Just enough to snap me out of the fog in my head. I laughed. I couldn't help it. You want to play stick now? Is that it? He barked again. I looked around for the one he'd carried home yesterday, but of course we'd left it by the couch like a placeholder for all my unfinished thoughts. Max didn't seem to care. He darted to the base of a gnarled old tree and started digging around in the frost and leaves until he unearthed another branch, wet and half rotten, perfect in his eyes. He trotted back to me, stick clamped proudly between his teeth. Dropped it at my boots. Sat back, tail sweeping the dirt. Throw it, his eyes said. Just throw it. So I did. He tore off across the grass, a blur of black and tan and wagging tail. He skidded, grabbed the stick, bounded back like he'd just discovered treasure for the first time in his life. He dropped it again. I threw it again. And for a while, that was all there was, the thunk of wood hitting dirt, the sharp snap of cold air in my lungs, Max's panting breath, and the wag of his tail. A loop. A ritual. A promise that some things didn't have to make sense to matter. After the fifth or sixth throw, I sat back on the cold bench. Max dropped the stick at my feet but didn't nudge me to toss it again. Instead, he sat in front of me, stick between his paws, head tilted like he was waiting for me to say something first. Okay, I said, my voice so soft it almost didn't feel like mine. You win. We'll keep the door open. Whatever that means. Max blinked, slow and patient. Then he nudged the stick closer, like a punctuation mark at the end of my promise. I didn't know what I was agreeing to. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But when I stood up and clipped the leash back to his collar, the tightness in my chest felt a little looser. The door in my head, one of them, at least, stopped rattling on its hinges. Back home, I didn't slam the door. I left it ajar while I fed Max, while I boiled water for real coffee, not the instant stuff. I listened for footsteps in the hall but heard nothing except the familiar creak of my floorboards as Max paced between his food bowl and the front door, his nails clicking a steady beat. When he finished eating, he settled by the door, head resting on his paws, eyes fixed on the gap where warm air slipped into the hallway. Waiting. Watching. Maybe guarding. Maybe hoping. I sat on the floor beside him, my back against the cool wood, the note folded small in my palm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to close it all off, to lock the world out until I forgot how to let it back in. Max shifted closer, pressing his weight into my hip until I leaned into him, too. I rested my head on his broad back and breathed in the smell of wet fur and warm dust. And for a long moment, I believed it, believed that maybe some doors don't have to slam. That maybe, just maybe, someone on the other side is waiting to come home. If you'd asked me a week ago what my biggest fear was, I would have said running out of money. Or maybe the landlord's knock. Or my mother's voice cracking when she says my name. All true. All safe fears, ordinary, acceptable, the kind you can admit over cheap coffee with people you don't really trust, but sitting here on the floor. My shoulder pressed into Max's solid side, the draft from the half-open door brushing the back of my neck. I realize those aren't my real fears. Not really, what I'm really afraid of is the other side. What waits if I stop slamming doors? What leaks through the cracks when you decide to let the world in? Grief, hope, unfinished conversations, people who leave notes in someone else's hands because they don't trust you to open it any other way. Max lifts his head. His ears perk. He stares at the door like he hears something I can't. Maybe he does, maybe he's always one step ahead of me when it comes to the things I try to ignore. I hold my breath, listening. For a heartbeat, there's nothing but the old radiator ticking its dry song. Then, soft, almost shy, footsteps. Slow, uneven, coming down the hallway like whoever owns them isn't sure they're welcome here. Max whines low in his throat. Not fear. Not threat. Just a question. Ready? I shift my weight, knees stiff from sitting too long on the cold floor. I press my palm to Max's shoulder. His fur is warm, grounding. I'm here. He's always telling me that without saying a word. The footsteps stop just beyond the door. A shadow spills across the crack of light where the hallway bulb flickers overhead. I feel my ribs tighten like they're bracing for an impact that might never come. A knock, this time softer than before. 1, 2, 3. A heartbeat of silence. Then, hello? The voice is small. Hesitant. The same boy. Of course it is. Who else would stand on the other side of a half-open door, carrying pieces of my past in his jacket pocket? Max stands. He plants himself between me and the door. Not blocking, just anchoring. His tail wags once, a slow sweep across the dusty floor. I clear my throat. My voice comes out rough, but steady. It's open. A pause. Then the door pushes wider on its squeaky hinge. The boy slips inside like he's afraid the door might change its mind. He looks smaller in the dim light, his shoulders hunched. Eyes darting from me to Max to the old boxes stacked by the wall like they're proof I've never really unpacked my life. He shoves his hands into his pockets. There's dirt under his nails. His eyes flick to Max again and soften a little. Smart kid. Knows who the real guardian is here. You came back, I say, because I don't know how else to start. He nods once. Swallows hard. Yeah, I thought you might want more. More. The word tastes sharp in my mouth. More of what? Questions? Answers? More reminders that my brother is somewhere I can't find, but not gone enough to stay quiet forever. Max leans into my side, his head brushing my arm. His eyes never leave the boy. I shift, knees popping as I stand. I catch the kid's flinch, like maybe he expects me to yell or slam the door this time for good measure. Instead, I gesture to the couch. Sit. He hesitates. Then he does, perches on the edge like the old cushions might bite him. I stay standing. Max plants himself between us, half facing me, half facing him. A silent bridge. What's your name? I ask. The boy's eyes flick down. He picks at a loose thread on his sleeve. Eli. I nod once. Okay, Eli. You want to tell me why my dog is passing me secret notes now? His laugh is small, nervous, but real. I don't think I know he didn't write it. Obviously. He rubs the back of his neck. Your brother. He asked me to. The name sits on my tongue, heavy, sticky. I don't say it. Not yet. He asked you how? I press. Where is he? Eli shrugs, but it's not careless. It's tight. Controlled. I don't know where he is right now. He moves around a lot. Doesn't want to be found, mostly. But sometimes he checks in. Through people like me. I want to laugh. Or scream. Or crumble into the couch cushions next to Eli and ask him to start over until it all makes sense. Max noses my knee. A reminder. Stay here. Breathe. Don't slam the door, I grip the back of the armchair instead. Why me? Why now? Eli looks up at me then, really looks, like he's measuring how much truth I can hold before I shatter. Because you're ready. Or he thinks you might be. I bark out a bitter laugh. Ready for what? A ghost? A letter? Another goodbye. Eli shakes his head fast. Not goodbye. He wanted you to know he's okay. That you don't have to keep shutting everything out just because he did. He wanted you to know his words stick in his throat. He looks at Max, like maybe the dog will translate what he can't say. Max does what he always does, he moves closer. He presses his head into my thigh, steady as a heartbeat, solid as a promise. He wanted you to know you weren't the one who closed the door first, Eli finishes, voice small but clear. He did. He's sorry. The room goes quiet. Even the radiator holds its breath. For a heartbeat, it's just me and this boy with someone else's message heavy on his shoulders. And Max, pressing against me like he knows the shape of every door I ever slammed shut to keep the ache out. I sink onto the arm of the chair. The paper is still in my pocket, soft from how many times my fingers have unfolded it, traced the shape of my brother's letters. Don't close the door. A command. A plea. A seed. So what now? I ask. The question isn't for Eli. It's for the walls, the air, the ghost who might be listening from somewhere I can't reach. Eli shrugs, eyes bright but not tearful. He said you'll know. When you're ready. Where to look. Max lifts his head from my leg and licks my wrist. Once, warm and quick, an anchor. You're here. Now I look at Eli. He looks so small on my couch, all bones and borrowed courage. How do you know him? I asked. Eli's mouth twitches. He helped me once. When I was sleeping behind the old bus depot last winter. He gave me his jacket. A meal. Said if I ever saw you, if Max ever found me, I'd know what to do. The ache behind my ribs cracks open just enough to let in something I can't name. Hope. Fear. A map made of half-broken lines that lead back to a brother I haven't seen in 4 years. A creak at the door makes us both jump. Max stands again, shoulders squared. The door swings a little wider on its tired hinge, like the building itself is exhaling, and oh, one's there this time. Just the hallway, quiet and dim, waiting. I look at Eli. Do you have a place to go? He shakes his head. Doesn't matter. It does to me, I say. And I mean it. I feel Max's tail brush my calf, a soft, steady yes. You'll stay here tonight. Both of us. All of us. Eli's eyes go wide. He doesn't nod. Doesn't argue. Just lets out a breath that sounds like he's been holding it since my brother first gave him that note. Max noses the door once, then once more, gently, like he's testing it. He looks at me, eyes bright in the hallway light. I smile. Just a small one. But real. All right, Max. You win. We'll keep it open. I don't close the door, not tonight.